So let's finish chapter 17, and then we can move on to other practicing of putting some assemblies together during class. So in the last exercise, what we did was we assembled 2 door hinges and a pin, and we put them together. The next thing that we did was we were able to move, so at the bottom of the screen I selected this cube that has little movement options on it. We were able to move this hinge, and we can move it, let me move this out of the way, we can move it in an angular dimension. So you guys can see, and one thing that you're noticing too is that because I don't have any constraints on this part, let's say I wanted to keep it like that. So you can see the door hinge has moved, and look what's happened to the pin. Okay? Look what's happened to the pin. I can also select to move the pin. Let's say I have this. And I can move it in different directions, this way, this way. So look what's happened. When I move the door hinge, you may have noticed that the pin just kind of floated out like a ghost feature or something. Why did that happen? Well, that happened because we didn't set the appropriate constraints yet to this particular pin. So what constraints can we add in order to have this pin aligned in this door hinge? Let's go to our constraints, so that's at the bottom of the screen, the assembly constraints. We'll select touch and align. Okay. And let's say we want to align this cylindrical face of the pin with the cylindrical face of this pin. Okay. It looks a little bit off center, so I'm going to cancel that. And I'll try it one more time. So let's go to our constraints. I want it to align. I want to align this part of the face. And let's say the inner part of this face instead this time. Yeah, let's just say that. That's a little bit better as far as being inside of the door hinge. So you may have select that I'm reversing the direction of that last constraint. And that's okay. So what I've told this to do is that I've told it that this pin mount must always be aligned with this door hinge. And also, if you remember, we set the constraint earlier that this door hinge is in line with this door hinge. So, in essence, all of these are combined together to make a larger constraint. And again, I'm using the assembly navigator. So, let me go ahead and move this pin, and you may notice something a little bit different. So let me select this. I shouldn't be able to move it up and down, the pin, anymore. Okay? But if you do notice, I can move the pin in and out of this door hinge. If we want to fix that, okay, if we want to fix the pin, we can add more constraints. So let's add some more constraints so that we can't move the pin anymore. Okay? Let's see. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some constraints. I'm going to click my constraints button, and I'm going to go ahead and use the touch constraint, because I want, now that these are aligned, I want the face of this pin, okay, to touch the face of this hinge. So that's another constraint that I use now. Okay, so now if I choose to move this hinge, let's say I want to move this one. This is all constrained together, so now it all moves in unity. Okay, now the pin is not going to pop out all of a sudden if I do move these. So now you can see, and again, we can use constraints. So we can set constraints. We can set an angular constraint if you guys are really wanting to set the angle here to be, let's say we want it to be perfect, 90 degrees. we can set any different constraints that we want, similar to when we were using sketches. Another good feature for you to know is if we go to, let's say, I wanted to know how this pin was aligned in here, and it doesn't look like it's very centered. For example, here it's not exactly in the center. That's okay. But what I want to do is I want to go to Edit, Object Display, and let's say I want to select this object, okay? Now this is a good feature to use if we have pieces like this. This translucency. You can increase the translucency of this particular piece so that we can see what's happening underneath it and inside of it. So that's a good little tip as you do these assemblies, so you can see how these pieces are actually fitting in with each other. Last thing I want to cover from chapter 17 are exploded views. Okay? So let's go ahead and try to do an exploded view. So let me back up. What an exploded view is, it's a view or a particular arrangement of these different parts exploded or moved away from each other, so we can see each individual part and separately. We can always bring them back together using this option, but let me show you what I mean. So at the bottom we have a little tool with 3 squares called Exploded Views. Let's go ahead and click that. Let's start a new explosion, and we'll just leave it the name Explosion 1. A couple things we can do. We can do an auto explosion, so we can select that. Let's select all the objects and let's see what happens. And let's say we want all the explosions to move 3 inches away from each other, and it looks like these two stayed together. That's okay. You see that these moved. What we can do also is we can look at and move the explosion part ourselves and say this is not exactly what I wanted, and it's not. So I can move these objects. Let me select an object. So let's select this one, and now let me move it. So I can move it over here, and I can say, okay, this is it. This is how it looks over here. I can select this object, and I can move it, and it'll move in relation to each other. Or I can go back again, edit my explosion, select this pin, move it. So let's say I wanted to look at it like this, and I wanted to just kind of get an idea of how my pieces looked all separated. Okay, I wanted to just see, and let's say you wanted to look, how do they look in terms of one another, all these different components. Maybe you want to illustrate something. Once you're done, you can just unexplode the component. Let's say we want to put all 3 back together, and it'll all come back together and be just like it was. So that's a good thing to know as well. So I think now that you all have a good fundamental understanding of assemblies after these 3 lectures, what you can do now is practice these. We're going to be doing assembly project 17.8 in class, but we're going to be putting a little device and lever and some components. I probably will post some of the pieces online for you, or I will copy the parts of the book that you need for this particular assignment. But I think overall you guys understand now how to do assemblies, how to use assembly constraints, how to use the assembly navigator. And now we need to practice some of these things. Last part of the course, what we're going to cover is drafting. So actually putting these pieces into a blueprint form so you can actually get them made in the machine shop.